In this tutorial, we are going to continue right where we left off in the previous one. As you can recall, we start to import 2D and 3D assets coming from 3D creation software. If we reload our project, which was located on my desktop, untitled, and open, this was the boring scene that we start working with. Basically, if we have a look now at something that is more complete, in Blender, I got this scene loaded, which is looking pretty good. We got physical based rendering, we got emissive surfaces, we got ambient occlusion, we got shadow, and so on. It looked good. It looked really good. But as we start selecting a specific object and check how this object material is actually built, we realize that it is unusable. If we export that whole scene as one standard asset exchange format, we are going to end up with basically only the geometry, maybe if we are lucky with 2 or 3 texture, but that's basically it. What is happening these days is those content creation software, as well as other software that have that type of viewport, they are basically spoiling us. The content that you create is basically unusable outside of their environment. And this is why with NRG we are going to be able to create our own and manage and control what is coming in and how it's coming in. The other solutions that basically have that type of viewport, it's basically also at what cost, and cost in terms of performance, GPU, CPU, memory, and plus to have that kind of output, the workflow is out of your control. It is managed internally to make sure that this is how it's going to look like. If we come back to our boring previous scene, here we're going to realize that there's actually more than meet the eyes in this scene. If we go in shading and we select one of our box here, if we have a look at the material, we can see that there's actually quite a few physical texture on disk, not generated like you saw in the previous project that I was displaying just now. These are actually real texture coming from external tools such as Substance Painter or whatever you're using. We have a base color, a metallic, roughness, and a normal map. And all these are connected to that node here, which is our main shader that we do not have basically any control on except just plugging stuff here. We have no idea of how this shader is actually built, and this is what we are going to do inside our NRG editor. I am going to first go back in my NRG editor, and I am going to select my camera and click Ctrl I to inverse the selection, and the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to delete everything. I am going to go on my material group here. I'm going to delete everything. My mesh, delete everything. Shader, I'm going to go on my base shader and I'm going to rename it to be PBR for physical based rendering. And I'm going to go on texture and I'm going to get rid of all that as well. Now I'm going to go from the asset menu and import, and I'm going to re-import my scene just as I did in the previous tutorial, but this time I am going to do something different. I select my Kaleda file, I'm going to click open, and this time I'm going to go on the materials tab. I want to import the material library, yes. Generate the base shader, yes, for the one that we are not going to have a material preset. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to create a new material preset that I'm going to call PBR. Now, how these presets, how these material presets work, it check for an identifier at import time in the material name. If this identifier is actually detected, this is the action that you will be taking. You will be applying this specific shader. You will load a specific sampler at a specific slot and so on. If we go back in our Blender file here, if I click on on one of my checker cube, I'm going to see that the name of that material is checker underscore PBR. Back in NRG editor, I'm going to make sure that my identifier is underscore PBR. Any material that contain underscore PBR at import time will, this preset, this pattern will be applied. So every time I'm detecting underscore PBR in a material name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the shader PBR. As my first texture slot, I'm going to search for a texture that is called base color. I'm going to search for roughness, normal map on the second one. Normally that's what I do. Third one, let's say that we're going to put the roughness, and the last one underscore metallic. If I have a look at my scene texture, I'm having checker underscore base color. This is basically the base color, the diffuse that we have been importing the first time around. Now this time with my material preset, I'm going to go check for my underscore PBR in my material name, and as I load my checker, in my first texture slot 0, I'm going to look for metallic, I'm going to look for underscore normal, I'm going to look for underscore roughness, and this will create me a full PBR material that I will have control on. Now if I repeat the same process here, now that my preset is done, if I click import every time I'm checking this identifier, and you can create as many preset as you want with as many identifier as you want. So as your application, your game is growing and growing, you're going to have more and more and more requirements over the shader, the type of effects that you want to do, and you can all create preset for that just by a simple name, a simple identifier coming from the material, and the whole material construction will change and will be adjusted, which makes your work in 3D creation software actually reusable. If I click the import button this time, my scene is re-imported just the way I see it the first time around, but this time if I click on one of my cube here and go check its material property, I will notice that automatically on my checker underscore PBR, I got the shader PBR that I've been applied, my base color, my normal map, my roughness map, and my metallic map. If I select one of the face of my skybox here, I go back to my default, generate my base shader automatically, and assign my skybox texture for the specific face. I do not want the skybox to receive any type of lighting whatsoever. It's just a skybox. So my objects here will be influenced by the different light that we have here, but not the skybox. The skybox just stay as plain as it is. If we go back in solid mode, we're going to notice also that we have some artifacts here that are usually taken care of automatically, but since we have control over each and every surface, once again, not only its construction but also its property, we are going to select a face here. That's our front face, and we're going to select our sampler. We have more settings that appear here that allow us to fix that artifacts, which is actually caused by the wrap mode of the texture. And this time we're going to select clamp to edge. Clamp to edge. If I check, I already got this face here that have been fixed. If I repeat the process for the other one, we have it fixed. No seam whatsoever. Repeat the process for each and every face, and we will have a perfect skybox on every faces. If you're not familiar with the current viewport manipulation that I'm doing right now about the control, how I'm moving around the viewport, of course there is the this area of my screen that contain the good key and which mouse. I think did them all. Button I'm pressing. If you're not familiar with how to navigate your way inside the viewport, I would suggest you to watch the View 3D tutorial, basically an overview of the main control that you have in the viewport. So to conclude this tutorial, I've shown you how to start creating your own material preset that will import your own set of texture, and for the next tutorial we are going to start building, coding our main renderer.